All right, today we're going to be talking about the distance formula. Distance formula is just a variation of the Pythagorean theorem. Basically, what the distance formula itself is stated as such. It's the distance is equal to the square root of x1 minus x2 squared plus y1 minus y2 squared. And basically all this is doing is it's between 2 points. If you think of a graph, actually let's look at a graph right here. If you think of a graph, this is the distance between 2 points, right? From this point to this point. Basically all you're doing with the distance formula is when you subtract the two x's, you're figuring out this distance right here. Okay? So this was at 2 on the x-axis, and this is at -2, so 2 minus a -2 would actually be 4, right? So if I count this 1, 2, 3, 4, that's the distance of that horizontal leg. It's the same thing with the vertical leg too. This is at 1, this is at -1, 1 minus a -1 is 2. All it's doing is giving you the two legs when you're subtracting the coordinates like that. Okay? So if you think about this, this is just basically saying everything inside the parentheses is A, everything inside of this parentheses is B, so you get A squared plus B squared, add them together, and then you square root, just like the Pythagorean theorem. Okay, it's just a way of doing it without actually having to look at a graph. You can just look at the points and figure it out. So let's look at an example here. So let's set up our 2 points. So again, the first coordinate is always your x, so we'll call this x1, y1, and this is x2, y2. Okay, so then when we set it up, we're going to say distance is going to equal the square root. x1 is 0, so we're going to replace x1 with 0, and then minus x2, which is 1, and then square it, and then y1 is 5 minus a -1 squared. Now, 0 minus 1 is just going to be -1 squared, and then plus 5 minus a -1 would be 6 squared. Now right here is where almost all of you will make a mistake, okay? Because what happens when you plug in a negative number on the calculator and you square it? It gives you the error, right? Because if I think about what -1 squared means, it's saying -1 times -1, right? What's a negative times a negative? It should be a positive, but your calculator is saying it's a negative. Okay? Because it does an order operations error. It thinks of that negative as multiplying, so it does the exponent, then it multiplies by a negative. If you wanted to do it correctly, you would have to put the -1 in a parenthesis and then square it. And then it'll give you the correct answer. Now, you don't necessarily, if you forget to put it in parentheses, that's fine. Just realize that any number, no matter what, when you square it, is going to give you a positive number. Okay? So whenever you square something, your answer should be positive. That's why it doesn't really matter which coordinates you're subtracting, because at the end, when you square it, it's going to become positive and it's going to make sense. Just remember, guys, distance cannot be negative. There's no such thing as negative distance. Okay? So if you're trying to put negative distances together, you're doing something wrong. So just remember that. So -1 squared is going to be +1, and then 6 squared is 36. Add them together, we get 37. Okay, but then we still have that square root that we need to do, so we would square root it. And we get 6.082, which would just round to 6.08. Okay, and that's your final answer right there. Okay, let's look at another example. So let's look here at number 3. So distance is equal to square root. x1 is 1, so 1 minus x2, 8 squared, plus 7 y1 minus y2, which is 1 squared. Okay, 1 minus 8 is going to be -7 squared, plus 7 minus 1, which is 6 squared. Remember, guys, whenever you square a negative number, it is going to become positive. So negative 7 times negative 7 is actually positive 49. So you got 49 plus 36. 49 plus 36 is going to be 85. Right? Yeah. 85. So distance is equal to the square root of 85, and the square root of 85, 9.219, which would round to 9.22. Distance is going to equal 9.22. And there's your final answer. Okay? Not too tough. These can actually go pretty quickly when you do them. So let's do another example. So distance is equal to square root. X1 is negative 7, so negative 7 minus x2, which is negative 4, minus a negative 4 squared, plus 6 minus 5 squared. So negative 7 minus negative 4, same sign, add and keep, right? So that's going to become a plus. So negative 7 plus 4 is negative 3 squared. And then 6 minus 5 is just going to be 1 squared. Negative 3 squared is 9. 1 squared is 1. Distance is going to equal the square root of 10. And the square root of 10 is 3.162, which is just 3.16. So the distance is going to equal 3.16. And that is the distance formula.